Lacey Bailey. Um, I am the founder of Foster Kids United. And basically, I'm just going to kind of read my testimony and how I came to find God. And so, growing up, I never really knew God. I do remember going to like a church camp called Sunshine Camp, and we sang, church songs and then days. I also had a friend that I remember who took me to youth group a few times. And I also remember going to this church just for kids when I was younger with my cousins. And um, yeah, so those were kind of my younger memories. But there was always something inside of me that wanted to know God and, believe it was true. But as I got older, I was forced to go with foster families, and it only seemed like something forced. And so I did get baptized with one family that I was with through an Episcopalian church. And I was really too young though to really accept God as my Lord and Savior. Therefore, I like don't really count that time as the time that I accepted Jesus. And so basically God was something that was just talked about in my family, like during deaths. And they're up in heaven, and like it was kind of that kind of talk within my family. It was never about, learning about him or reading the Bible or anything like that. It was more of just, at funerals and stuff like that. And when I was in a group home in Billings, I started going with some of the staff to get out of the group home, and they usually took us out to eat after. And so that was kind of like why I went. I went to go for the food afterwards. And I remember looking around and just when I was at church and just seeing everyone worship and holding their hands up, and some were crying, and you could just see like the peace over them. Like, and I wanted that. Like I remember looking around and you know, seeing that. And there was even one moment when the pastor had called up people, and, he called up to the front and he started laying hands and saying stuff on them. And each one, as he said something, they would fall to the ground. And I'm like, and he would like cover them with a blanket, and they all just stayed there. And then like one by one, people would start getting back up. And I was like, that's really weird. Like it was really weird to me. And so I was just like, basically, I just thought in my head they're fake and they're just faking it and it was all a show and they're all pretending. And that's what I felt. But also, I didn't know how so many people could all be faking it, like all at the same time. And so a part of me wanted to go up there just to see, if that would happen to me, if I would fall, unwillingly fall if when he touched me. But I just didn't get up the nerve to go up there. But basically, I just kept going on through life, not believing. I just kind of put it on the back burner and just lived my life. And I didn't try to get a relationship with God. I just didn't think about it. And so I met Ryan, my now husband, and we started going to church a little bit here and there when we lived in Washington, but it was just a Sunday thing, like by Sunday night, we were back to our old selves. And, he was really quiet about his relationship with God and praying and reading the Bible. He just didn't talk about it much. And so it was really superficial for me back then. Like I didn't get all the feelings and stuff like that that I have now. And so he always told me, that he picked up the Bible every time he ended up back in jail. Like God was putting him in timeout, and that he would pick up the Bible and start reading it. And that's kind of like the basis I knew of his relationship with God. And when I first got with him, he said that he was an alcoholic and that he had a few DUIs, and that if he ever started to drink, that I needed to leave him. That, he just threw all his responsibilities down the drain, and he became like a bad person and just someone I wouldn't want to be with. And so for the first couple years, of our relationship, we were doing really good. We didn't drink. He was sober. And then a couple years down the road, it was near the 4th of July, and we had discussed, having a beer or two for the holidays and for the 4th. And I didn't really understand. I mean, I knew my family and my mom is an alcoholic, and so I knew that, what alcohol does and stuff, but I didn't really realize how bad it could get. with just, having a drink every now and then. And so we started drinking and then it became it kind of spiraled downhill. It started becoming, more than the holidays. It became the weekends. Every weekend we were drinking. And then all of a sudden, it'd be, him coming home from work and getting a beer. And he has 8 DUIs already, or 7 DUIs. And so I basically, didn't know how bad it was gonna get, but I also just had a baby, and so I was dealing with postpartum depression. I, could barely shower myself, take care of myself. I was just really depressed, and I didn't wanna go anywhere or do anything, and he was actually going to buy me a gun because he worked full time and I was at home with the kids. So I needed to protect myself, and so we kinda started fighting a little bit more and more with my postpartum and his drinking, and he ended up going to his sister's alone without me. I told him I didn't wanna go, and his sister lived, what, an hour and a half away, I believe, and so it was quite a drive, and, let me see where I am. Um And so it was quite a drive, and so that night, I think they were drinking, and so he called me and he told me that he was gonna stay there because they had been drinking and that, it was the better choice for him to do, especially with the kids and stuff, and so they ended up staying there, and, um, when they got up, they decided they wanted to go, and me and him were fighting too that night, and I think the last thing I had texted him was not to come back home and that I didn't wanna see him again. But that morning, they had got up and they decided on their way home, or maybe before or whatever, they were gonna go try the new gun, and on their way home, he actually had it on him on a holster, which he's a felon, and so that's, like, automatic, 10 years if you're caught with a gun and you're a felon, and so when I woke up that morning, I had also started to drink, and I so that also didn't help the situation with how I was acting and stuff like that, but when he was driving home, he had said he had lost full control, like, it's as if someone had taken over and he was possessed by a demon, like, he kept yelling at himself to just stop, stop, and slow down, and he was, going really fast down the highway, the kids are in the car, and he just kept telling himself, slow down," and he couldn't stop, and all of a sudden, he looked behind him and there was cops. And from the report that I got, it had said that someone had called in that he was all over the road and that he was going super fast. And so they had pulled him over and they gave him a breathalyzer and saw that they thought that the kids weren't buckled in their car seats because we had the car seats where they just stay buckled in, and so, like, just the base stays buckled in, and we put the car seat on it, but they saw the seat belt, and thought that they weren't buckled in, so in the report, it had that the kids weren't buckled, and that Hazel was in a soiled diaper, and it looked like it hadn't been changed forever, which, I mean, he was driving an hour and a half away, and so she was sitting in the car that whole time. Well, the sheriff called me and told me that my kids were at DFS and that I needed to go pick them up. And so, but since I had already started drinking, I called the people that I nannied for at the time. I had been watching their kids. And I said, "Hey, look, I've been drinking. Here's the what's going on and I need help." I was like, "Can you go give me a ride to go down there and to get my kids?" And so when I went down there, it was taking them forever to come out. Like, we sat there for a good half an hour, and finally a lady came out and she was like, "Well, plans have changed. We're actually gonna keep them overnight. As we were examining your daughter, we found a hair wrapped around her toe, cutting off her circulation. And it just looks like they're neglected and they haven't been taken care of, and so we're gonna open an investigation." And I'll get more into my foster care story later on, but I already have trauma with DFS and taking my kids and stuff like that. And so I automatically freaked out and, was mad at Ryan. I didn't know how to control myself. I was going through postpartum depression, which is really bad. And so like I basically just lost it. I cried for like 2 days. But when we went to like Ryan's family, when we went to I don't know what they're called, like the first appointment with them to like talk about the case plan. Ryan's family went with me and we had like a really nice house at this time, like the nicest house I've ever had. We lived on the lake, and so it was like a really nice house. We had the support and stuff. And so that first meeting, they saw the support system I had and then all the, wonderful things that they said about me and Ryan and how, he works and comes home and we're living a really good life. We're great parents and just stay out of trouble. And they had our backs, which was not a lie, but his family also didn't know how much we were drinking and to the extent. And so the social worker warned me that Ryan was not allowed, if he got out of jail, Ryan was not allowed to come back to the house, but that they would allow the kids to stay with me while I worked the case plan, which is like once in a lifetime thing. That never happens. And so I know 100% that was God, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without my kids there with me working that case plan. Like God knew that I needed that. And so I ended up, doing everything I needed to for that. And I was hurt and upset with Ryan because that's, what I connected to them getting taken away from me and losing them. And so during this time, though, we had stopped going to church, but I still knew God had his hand in this. And so they usually, go to a foster home until you can complete the case plan, is what usually happens. And so for them to allow them to stay with me while I completed it was a blessing, like 100%. And so Ryan, I thought he was looking at least 10 to 20 years in prison. Um, and I basically decided after the case was closed that I was going to move back to Montana with my family. And I didn't have any plans on sticking around to wait. And, one day he called me and he told me that God told him that it looked worse on paper, that everything that he's charged with and everything, God had told him that it looked worse on paper. And of course, I didn't believe it. I just figured he had high hopes because, that was the case. But um during that, I kind of like shut down. I like stopped answering his phone calls. And then one night I had gotten drunk and this dude had told me that he had all this money. And one thing I don't like talking about really is my past and stuff. And so I was cam modeling and stuff to get money um in the past. And so that's like I continued that after he went into jail. And so this one dude, he told me that, he was going to come and see me and this and that. And I didn't believe him, but he actually sent me a picture of the plane ticket and told me that I needed to pick him up at Seattle this date and in the morning. And so I figured, it's just the weekend, what the hell? And so he ended up coming over. Well, the day he was supposed to get on a plane, we had gotten drunk, super drunk the night before, and we both slept in and he missed his flight. And when Ryan got his taxes, I basically decided I was going to use that money to go back home to Montana and get into a place and stuff like that. And so he decided he wanted to see Montana too. And he was going to come with me and help me move all the stuff and everything like that. So we'd just both start over and rebuild what we had. And I was, fine having that extra help. So I just kept him around. But I never did like the guy though. It, ended 6 months later when he ended up trying to spank my kid and playing dad and stuff like that. Ended up telling him, you just need to go back to Michigan. And shortly before that, Ryan called and told me they were sending him back to Montana from Washington, which is crazy that God had ended up sending him back to where I ran away to. But he called me and told me that they were sending him to a program in Montana called START. And that was only about, 20 minutes away from where I lived in Butte. And he said when he was getting out, he'd be staying with his sister in Helena, but we needed to get a parenting plan in place and figure out when he gets out, the the plan with the kids, and we'd keep it civil and keep our peace for the kids and stuff like that. And so I let him start talking to the kids towards the end. And at my one of my little cousin's birthday party, I met another guy who I ended up dating before Ryan got out. And so I look back now and I know that I just had gotten to another relationship to make sure I wasn't available for Ryan when he got out. But I ended up picking him up from start when he did get out and giving him a ride to meet his sister halfway. And after he got out, he was all about God. He had started posting about God. And, of course, I figured, he found God in jail like they all do. And so I was just like, I kind of rolled my eyes at it, all of the posts and everything that he was doing. And at that time, I didn't, I wasn't going to church and didn't have a relationship. So I was just like, I just kind of blew it off, and I was like, oh, yeah, he found God. But even through all of that, something about him was different. Like the way he treated me, even though I was so cold towards him and didn't answer phone calls and ignored him and didn't write back to his letters, there was just something about his love and his kindness. And no matter how cruel I was, he still loved me no matter what. And so that, kind of like set off this like seed in me, like something is different about him. And so Ryan got out 9 months later and he still loved me and the kids with all his heart. And, little did I know that this situation was gonna, basically start the journey of my faith with God. And so, I mean, God basically what I believed because I thought he was getting 10 to 20 years and he got out 9 months later. And so I'm like, he told me that, God had said it looked worse on paper and then that became fulfilled. And so I'm like, and I started kind of like rethinking the whole God thing. And so we started texting more. And even when I was still with the other guy, I was starting to fall for him over again. And, we started talking and we actually ended up um, back together. And when we actually had our parenting plan, we had court for that on um, a day, and we ended up going to that court meeting holding hands. And the judge is like, this like never happens. Like, you guys are in here, and we're like, well, we still want to keep the parenting plan in place just in case, but we're together and we're going to work on this together and stuff like that. And so the judge is like, okay. And so he granted us whatever the parenting plan. And so we kept that in place just in case, just to have it as backup. But um so I ended up, let me see where I'm at. So I don't know how long we were back together before I ended up bringing up one day. We were just sitting there, and I was like, we should start going back to church. And so he agreed. And so we started going back to church. And then he remembered something that he wrote in one of his notebooks. He has all of these little notebooks that he kept while he was in jail. And he's like kept them throughout the time. And so he journaled and stuff and had prayers in here and stuff like that. And he remembered a prayer, like a promise that God had told him about us going to church together. After we had started going to church and stuff, after I had said that, he was like, hold on. And he had started going through again. And he read me the prayers and the promises. And I was like, oh my gosh, like it's my written testimony, literally like God's promise fulfilled to him. Because I even said, I told my family, my friends, everything, me and Ryan, we're not getting together. I was like, we're not. I don't want to be with him. We're not getting back together. And then shortly after we started talking again, I started falling for him again. And it was like God for sure. And so this is what the first one, let me see. Hold on. All right, this is one of his prayers. Lord, I know that all relationships with you are special, personal, and only grown by getting to know you. But I'm begging you for the day that Lacey and I can worship you together. You know too much. You know too how much it would mean to me to be united together and following you. But I also beg you for her sake. I want so bad for her to be able to share a life with you, no matter what happens between her and I. She deserves to be loved. She deserves to be happy. She deserves to have a blessed life knowing you and feeling your love. Lord, please help her see you and all the beautiful things you bring into life, all the love and hope you have given the world. Just be with her, Lord. Bless her and help her set her free. She is your child, Lord, so please love her as only you can. She deserves it. And that was a prayer that he did when we weren't together, like praying for, God to basically find me. And then this other one, it says, God's promise to me and my family. And this was dated 7/21/18. Love your family, bear that cross. Forgive all that's been done against you. Harbor no hatred or bitterness toward Lacey or Josh. Let go and follow Jesus. Let him guide you in love and with love. You will have your family back one day. It will be gained by love and the light of God being seen through you by them. That will bring them back. Fear not and worry about nothing. Trust and know that Jesus has them and you securely in his hands. And just follow Jesus. Set everything else aside but him. Allow him to work in you and through you. You have been called to be a light and a source of hope and love in this world by allowing God to work through you. Trust in him. Let go and surrender all of your life to him. He will fulfill your desires and carry you through if you continue to seek him and his kingdom first. God loves you and is here with you every step of the way. Trust your family to him. Remember, he loves them too. And then one more. Faith and hope. I hope that God will bring my family, Lacey, Ryder, Hazel, and I back together. I hope that through all this, Lacey and I will heal stronger in love than we ever were before. I hope that together we can be a happy, healthy, strong, loving team for our kids, that we all can grow together under God's love and guidance, that Lacey and I will be able to feel God's purpose for our individual lives while doing it together as parents, living a life of love united under God. That is what I hope will happen. My faith is in God that He can make it happen if it is in His will to do so. I hope it is His will. Faith equals confident assurance that what we hope for can happen, even if it is God's will. But now we are living testimony. He brought us together stronger than ever before. And through this storm, he had started reading back on these old journals and he found that formula that he wrote a book on, that acceptance plus trust equals faith. And as he was going through all those journals, that equation came up. And I told him, I was like, you should write a book about that. But these are literally written testimonies for me that are undeniable that God is real and that He can bring anything broken back together again. He can fix anything. And really, like, Ryan showed me what true unconditional love was. Like, he told me a quote. It said, only with love is love awakened. And he held on to that. And he truly showed me the definition of unconditional love. And through his social media posts and all of that, that was the seed. And God said that he was, going to get his family back by just the love of God. And so when the world told him it was over, he knew God had a different plan and he didn't give up. he wasn't gonna stop until he got his family back. And, like, this is when I knew God was for sure real. Like, I couldn't deny him after that, and his promise has been fulfilled a hundredfold, and he gave Ryan back everything 10 times, family and love, and now we're both worshiping God. And, my family doesn't even recognize the person I am anymore. Like, I learned about inner healing and deliverance, and I started to look more into that. And, you know, really, God just transformed me in rapid speed. You know, I basically started on like forgiveness work and healing and inner healing and, limited thinking work and stuff like that. And basically, it's all I needed. Years and years of therapy couldn't surmount to what God did in just this little time with me. And I look back to see the person I was, and it just amazes me to think of the progress that I've had in just a few years, from 2019, 2018. And, it alls I did my all my life and, despite me running and he chose to, call me out and just guide me and call me into his loving arms. And I pray and I talk to God like I am talking to a friend. I truly am blessed and have an amazing life that I cherish now. And God gave me my own family. And I truly do know He has a plan for each and every like one of you. You may not have, your biological family or, you know, anything like that, but God is our family, and we're a family here now in FKU. And so, your story and what you have gone through is someone else's hope that they can see the other side too. We've all fought battles, and storms. So that way we can understand and relate to other people and to help them back through their storms and show them that they're not alone. That's the whole reason I started this nonprofit is to show them that they're not alone. I share my testimony, in for the transformation and the transformative power of God's love and grace. Like that's ultimately, I wouldn't be who I am today without God changing me. And so it's a reminder that no matter how broken we are and, how far we've strayed, God is always ready to receive us with open arms when we turn to Him. And He can redeem our past and restore our lives and give us a future filled with hope. And so if you're going through a difficult time or you're struggling with your faith, I encourage you to reach out to God because He's there for you. He's waiting there with open arms with his love, his forgiveness, and his guidance, and you're not alone. With God, all things are possible. And so that's my testimony and a little bit about how I came to know God. Do you guys have any questions for me?